So I want to talk about something really interesting I came across. It's not just about a regular movie night, as a way to switch off. It's this story from a woman who calls herself Ellie, and she says that 6 very specific films gave her and her partner a whole new language right when they'd forgotten how to talk to each other. It's like movie night became their roadmap back, and this quote, wow. This just gets right to the heart of the problem Ellie was facing. It really hits home, doesn't it? It's not always the big, dramatic betrayals that cause the most damage. It's that slow, quiet drift. She said she felt like she was right on the edge of letting those silences win, but then this cinematic toolkit, well, it taught them how to speak again. For Ellie and her partner, it wasn't a sudden crisis. There was still love there. It was more like a slow fading out. You know that feeling? It was all the little unmet expectations piling up, the old hurts that never really healed properly. And just noticing one day that the shared joy, the laughter, it was mostly gone. They were becoming polite strangers living in the same house. And that quiet erosion, that's what they had to fix. So where do you even begin with something like that? Well, for them, it didn't start with a huge, soul-bearing conversation. Nope. The very first step was all about action. Let's look at the 2 films that gave them a blueprint for rebuilding that connection through small, deliberate rituals, and this is key: joyful, shared practice. Okay, so the first breakthrough came from a place she totally didn't expect. This gentle little British indie film. She thought she was in for some light laughs, but what she got was a mirror. The movie showed her just how easily habit can take the place of real attention. How a routine goodnight kiss can become, well, meaningless. It really highlighted the politeness that was just masking a huge distance in her own relationship. And this is the real magic she took from that film. It wasn't about planning some grand romantic gesture. It was all about the power of tiny, consistent rituals. So Ellie started her own little experiment. 2 deliberate kisses at midnight. No strings attached, no expectations. She said it felt kind of silly at first, but after a few weeks, it started to change the whole feeling of their evenings. Arguments cooled off faster. It just created this new sense of safety. All right, the second film in their action toolkit offered a completely different strategy. This one wasn't about those intimate, quiet rituals. It was about joyful, shared practice. Watching Julia Child's just relentless curiosity, and then Julie Powell's commitment to her project, it gave Ellie this whole new idea for what their partnership could actually look like. This slide really breaks down what they learned. They were so inspired, they just picked a cookbook and started cooking together. And that simple, tangible act of chopping vegetables, stirring a pot, even totally messing up a recipe, it just dissolved all the pressure. Their kitchen became this low-stakes laboratory for rediscovering each other, They were making new, positive memories instead of just replaying the old resentments. Okay, so they've started to build a new foundation with actions, which is huge, but the next part of this toolkit had to tackle the communication piece. So let's dive into how 4 very, very different films gave them a whole new script for honesty, for setting boundaries, and for finally having those conversations they'd been avoiding. Have you ever watched a movie and just thought, oof, that feels a little too real? That's what The Story of Us was for Ellie. The fights in the film weren't these big, epic Hollywood blow-ups. They were about unpaid bills and who was supposed to handle the parenting shifts. Basically, the exact same arguments happening at her own kitchen table. Watching it made her stop blaming their circumstances and start seeing the destructive patterns in how they actually talk to each other. Now, this slide is probably the most crucial tool she took away from that movie. The goal totally shifted. It wasn't about winning the argument anymore. It was about simply naming the pattern. She started using this one simple rule. Instead of a big sweeping accusation like "you never," she would try to name the specific hurt. When this happened, I felt like this. And honestly, it was a total game changer. It lowered the defensiveness and actually opened the door for a pair. This next film takes a totally different approach. This one is all about long, messy, just brutally honest conversations. For Ellie, watching it was like getting a permission slip to be imperfect. She saw so much of herself and her partner and how they use jokes or busy schedules to dance around the hard topics, letting all these little resentments just fester and grow into something huge. This line from the film really stuck with her. It taught her that avoiding a difficult conversation is often way more damaging than just having an imperfect one. So inspired by the movie, she and her partner actually scheduled 1 hour uninterrupted just to talk about what was worrying them. It was super awkward at first, she said, but it finally broke that cycle of avoidance. And now for a bit of a cautionary tale. This thriller isn't a model for what you should do, but it's this incredibly stark picture of what happens when honest boundaries are just never set. The whole tense vibe of the film, the constant flirtation, the provocation, the suspicion, it actually gave Ellie a new kind of clarity on her own relationship. And this film gave her a name for a dynamic she'd been feeling but couldn't quite label. She realized that certain behaviors she'd been kind of excusing as playful teasing, they were actually power moves. And you know what? Just being able to name it gave her the permission she needed to stop laughing it off and start setting clearer rules for how they treated each other. The last film in the toolkit is this really delicate, almost quiet story. It's all about those tiny severances, the missed text message, the forgotten promise, the little things that just accumulate over time. For Ellie, it was the perfect model for how to make small, tender repairs. Just look at how simple and doable these are. The movie gave them these little practical templates. So Ellie started leaving notes instead of just sending a text. She'd announce when she needed space instead of just withdrawing into silence. She started making these tiny gestures of care, and those little acts began to undo that whole pileup of tiny slights, rebuilding trust one little bit at a time. So let's bring this all together, shall we? What we really have from these 6 films is this incredibly powerful 2-part practice. It's a beautiful combination of rebuilding connection through small, consistent actions, and then finding a new, more honest language to actually communicate with each other. This slide is basically your takeaway map. It connects these core problems that so many of us face to a specific film, and most importantly, a concrete practice you can actually try. It's not just about watching a movie anymore, it's about using that story as a spark, as a catalyst for a real-world experiment in your own relationship. Okay, so this is where it all becomes real for you. The true power of this whole idea, this cinematic toolkit, is just how easy it is to start. You don't need to wait for a crisis or for some perfect moment to come along. You can take a small, proactive step starting tonight. Here's a really simple, totally low-risk exercise. This is not about having a heavy, capital T talk. It's about using the film as a kind of neutral third party to just open a door. Asking what would you do there lets you both explore feelings and ideas without it feeling like a direct accusation. It's all about creating curiosity instead of defensiveness. And there it is, the complete 6-film toolkit. From the tiny rituals and the joyful projects, all the way to finding honest words and making those tender repairs. Together, these stories offer a really comprehensive map for navigating the incredibly complex territory of a long-term relationship. So the final question isn't just about which movie you're going to watch next. It's about totally reframing film, not as just passive entertainment, but as an active tool. It's a prompt to see these stories as a source of scripts and models and questions that can actually help you and your partner write a better next chapter together. If any of this resonated with you, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Please like and subscribe for more explainers that turn complex ideas into clear, actionable insights. Thanks so much for watching.